essential questions need to be asked. How do we build and buy tech talent? How do we get access to hybrid tech talent pools? How can we align skill sets to the industry demand? And so we begin with the second episode of the series, which is Skills Over Degrees. How can businesses overcome the industry skills mismatch for tech talent? Before we begin, a little bit about our partner Scalar, who has helped us curate this session. Backed by the Sequoia Capital India, Lightrock India, and Tiger Global, Scalar is one of India's leading edtech and upskilling unicorn that aims to solve the tech talent gap worldwide. A transformation tech school, Scalar takes pride in creating talent with impeccable skills. Over the last few years, Scalar has built a reputation for tech excellence with outcomes comparable to leading national and international educational institutions. Scalar's parent firm, InterviewBit, has been featured on the Financial Times Asia Pacific High Growth Companies 2021 and 2022 ranking. This young startup has also been certified as a great place to work. Now, let us welcome our expert panelists. Today, we have with us Manmeet Sandhu, Chief People Officer at PhonePe. She joined PhonePe in December 2018 after her 9-year stint at Amazon. In her last role, she led HR for the Prime Video business in Seattle, USA. She has worked in the HR space for the last 17 years across multiple countries and in areas such as compensation, diversity and inclusion, and business partnering. Welcome, Manmeet.
Thank you so much, Osmani. Great to be here.
Also joining us today is Margaret D'Souza, Head of People Success at Zeta Suite. She partners with the leadership team to design effective solutions to enhance organizational effectiveness and ensures that it is aligned with the organization's goal and objectives. Margaret has been instrumental in building and sustaining a positive and progressive work culture across all businesses. With over 16 years of experience, she is well versed in designing and implementing processes, mapping and introducing best practices in various HR disciplines. She is result oriented with excellent relationship management skills and has experience in building high performance and goal focused work teams built on the foundation of shared collaboration, open communication, and a strong sense of accountability. Welcome, Margaret. It's really nice to have you with us today.
Happy to be back here again, and welcome everyone.
We also have with us Rajashekhar Khandrika, VP of Engineering at ExpressBees. He has engineering for B2C e-commerce and B2B cargo verticals and has nearly 9 years experience in the e-commerce and logistics domain with stints at Amazon, Flipkart, and now at ExpressBees. Prior to this, he worked at Microsoft for nearly 14 years in OS and web services. Rajashekhar joins us with the expertise and wisdom of 24 years in the world of software development. Thank you for
Thanks,
joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, let me introduce our moderator for this session, Abhimanyu Saxena, co-founder at InterviewBit and Scalar. Passionate about creating something new, he started his entrepreneurial journey during his BTech days. Abhimanyu experienced a scarcity of skilled tech talent owing to the considerable gap that exists between the university curriculum and the skills that are required to succeed as a software engineer. This led him to join hands with his college friend Anshuman Singh and launch InterviewBit. Since its launch in 2015, Abhimanyu and the team have been able to build InterviewBit into one of the most popular skilling and tech recruitment companies in the country. In 2019, they successfully launched Scalar, an online career accelerator program, the next step in the evolution of InterviewBit. We're very happy to have you with us, Abhimanyu.
Thank you so much, Asmani.
Now I'll hand over the session to you and wishing all the panelists a very great session ahead.
Super. Thank you. All right. So I think I will start with talking about a problem which I'm sure all the panelists and all our audience have been constantly at war with, which is the talent shortage in our industry. Uh, Now, if we talk about that, what is the reason for talent shortage? It's a very interesting dichotomy that often gets brought up. That on one side, we keep talking about the unemployment, so much, so much youth in our country who is trying to find a job, and on the other hand, almost all the talent acquisition leaders, hiring managers, companies are constantly worried about and keep complaining about how do we find the right talent, and specifically if I further narrow that, I think particularly tech talent, uh, how do we fill these roles? And if we talk about why this such a big gap exists, then probably that's rooted in the tech skill and expectation gap from the companies. And I would probably would want to start with this question to all the leaders from our most respected tech fraternity in our Indian ecosystem, that what do you believe is causing this talent gap that exists as of today between the supply of talent that we see and what is expected at your organizations? Maybe Manmeet, I would invite you first to share your comments on this.
Yeah, I think a large part of it is just the supply demand gap. There just aren't enough people who are trained up into doing what needs to be done in order to successfully manage the engineering challenges that we have in the current ecosystem. I think a lot of this, I think the key word over here is trained talent. And I mean, it's not as if people are not available. There are, of course, we have 1.4 billion people in the country. It's just that what skills are needed are simply not there. I think in the current ecosystem, there is also the challenge that a lot of these are small companies that are in the process of sort of setting themselves up. So they don't really have the luxury of bringing people in and taking them through sort of extended learning sessions, learning programs, which can sort of prepare folks. So the urge is always to look for ready-made talent. And even when you're going to campus, very frequently what you're looking for is somebody who is kind of extraordinarily smart, who's going to be able to pick things up by themselves, who's going to start sort of solving for problems immediately. And in my mind, therefore, like in a lot of ways, just a little bit of investment in the initial stages on getting people to start thinking about these problems in a fundamentally different way can help. It's not that it's not being done. There are other large organizations that do have a fairly structured to this. It's just that over the last few years, of course, we've had the benefit, of course, of having a very, very vibrant startup ecosystem. But the talent, that level of investment that is required to make sure that the talent ecosystem is keeping keeping pace with this product ecosystem is not kind of there. And I mean, again, whatever we can do to help get everybody there more at an ecosystem level and not necessarily at a company level probably is going to help us get better across this particular hurdle that everybody is facing right now.
Very interesting, Manmeet. I do have a follow-on question to that. As you mentioned that like a little bit of investing a little bit into helping people learn might definitely be a very good input. Which if I categorize as that in the talent, you have two strategies. One is buying talent versus building talent, right? And of course, building talent is a very important, very critical part for any organization, because you want to make sure that people in the team are constantly growing once they are inside as well. But if I press upon little bit upon acquiring talent from outside as well, because both the strategies have to play together for success. Can you share us about what are your thoughts on, so like in the past we have had many different traditional ways of finding new talent. The obvious ones might be that we might have a set of colleges where there have been slightly better success rate when you are trying to hire. And even when I talk about experienced hiring, generally the first priority is always to hire from a specific set of, let's say, high performance startups, etc., because we would know that people there would already be accustomed. But of course, the challenge with that comes to that pool is already very small. We might be talking about just 5-10 colleges in India, or there are already a very small set of high performance tech startups, given India is a growing ecosystem in tech. Have you been able to identify any other sources where maybe the noise might be a little more, but if those new channel sources are opened up, then sometimes you do find good quality talent there as well?
No, I think in engineering especially, it is very clear what is being looked for. Some of my non-tech roles, it's much more complicated because it's much harder to really assess capability in advance of getting a person into the organization, regardless of what methodology you use. But in engineering, it's or at least slightly easier, because the expectations are very clear and also very measurable. So it's so you are not really dependent on signals as much as you would be in any other place. So see, if I'm hiring for a business person from college, from a B school, I would necessarily say, okay, I'll go to the top 5 business schools and get there, because at least the filtering has already been done over there and I can move from there onwards. But in engineering, we know that there are core capabilities that we can just simply test for. So in that sense, of course, being able to use things like hackathons, being able to review better your, I wouldn't say interviewing, but your evaluation criteria in the beginning, using, of course, things like InterviewBait, things like HackerRank, even for that matter, which help simplify that process of, yeah, I can look at 10,000, I can go through 10,000 profiles much faster because I'm giving them all a particular test to sort of evaluate them on, and then I have a much smaller set of folks to sort of work with. I think we've also experimented a little bit with also seeing whether the interviewing process itself also can be standardized in some ways so that the bandwidth internally required to find the right folks out of that noise becomes a little bit easier. Um, and then, of course, there's the work that you guys are doing at Scala. There are other organizations that are helping sort of just take people through those initial few months of getting them ready. Because a lot of these things, it's like you need to know how to interview. You need to simply know how to sort of clear a test. And once you've gone through that process for 6 to 8 months, if you have the core capability, your likelihood of conversion becomes much higher. And I think increasingly, of course, those become the better mechanisms. I also believe that like these externalized organizations that are able to help companies identify or develop talent so that the talent gets developed at an ecosystem level and not just because one of the challenges with say any company trying to develop talent internally is that they then become prime targets for poaching from everybody else. But when some of this investment in developing is done at an ecosystem level, then everybody is invested in sort of making sure things get better, and the likelihood of the pool expanding, the positive disruption idea that we sort of talk about at PhonePe becomes so much more likely.
No, no, very, very interesting point, Manmeet. Thank you so much for that. I think, as you rightly mentioned, that of course industry have to invest in developing talent, but at the same time, it could only happen with a ecosystem level. It can only create a ecosystem level impact when all the companies do it together, and probably there could be external facilitator like Scalar, etc., which takes in inputs from all the tech organizations, implement it, and kind of redistributes it across all the companies instead of just one, because as they say, there's this Hindi proverb called ki akela chana can't do anything. A single thing can't create much impact. Thank you so much, Margaret. Coming to you, probably I would also love to get your thoughts along the similar lines. That while of course at Zeta, like we know, and as Manmeet also mentioned that tech is one good thing with tech is that it's much more objective. There could be boolean answers to whether the person has a certain capability or not, and hence there is no need for external signals. Manmeet, and maybe I'll also touch upon one more point, which is given you spent quite some time at Amazon Seattle, one pattern that have been a lot more common in West, particularly in US and Europe, that people do transition career domain roles a lot. There might be someone at a principal software engineering level who might in let's say 10 years of his first initial career might have been a photographer, right? uh, in India, however, and they succeed as well. Like in the West, we have so many examples of very high performing software engineers, architects, etc., who might have spent quite some time in their initial years doing something absolutely different, right? In India, however, we haven't seen that a lot. As a matter of fact, sometimes even it gets hard to change from one domain of tech to other because sometimes employers themselves are not willing to consider. Margaret, maybe I would love to take your comments on that. That have you seen people transitioning career and succeeding as well, or is it a growing trend that you are seeing in India?
Um, I don't know how rampant is it. I
Yeah.
mean, just being calling it out because I believe a lot of it is dependent on the environment the organization also, creates, right? When you have, the way in which the organization is, like for example at Zeta, right?
Yeah.
We work in a very stream in the, the squad, guilds, tribes format, which wherein you have a squad owner, you have people wearing multiple hats, you create ownership at that squad level for that output, and you also encourage people to play roles beyond their existing roles. You encourage people to grow. I mean, at Zeta there are a lot of roles, and it's not only at Zeta, I think across most of the technology organizations, We know of a lot of roles that are terminal. We know a lot of roles that with the direction that the organization is taking, they might be redundant, they might be irrelevant. So what is the organization doing to then make sure the same talent is also getting an opportunity of probably being on projects where they get to learn, and at the end of the day it's up to the individual, right? The organization can do X to provide those opportunities. It's also about the kind of individuals that you want to create that ecosystem with, that want to take that opportunity. So I believe that it is not that prevalent of people switching. I've seen many individuals still languish in languages where they have not made that switch, and
Mhm.
today are struggling with at a, I'm sure Raj can also weigh in on this, like for example PHP or some of those languages where it needed guidance
Yeah.
from those organizations to help them understand that it's time you pivot. You can't be left to deciding those organizations which will still continue with those legacy
Right.
systems, because there will be only then those scarce roles. So it's
Right.
a mix of where the organizations also need to play a role in making sure that they take talent along with them. Very few companies where I've seen where as part of the learning journeys there are specific programs, projects that are curated only for 6 month upskilling of talent, saying that, hey, like for example, today we're just one of the examples is, with the advancement of Kubernetes, right? How many organizations have probably taken their existing talent and upskilled them for newer technologies? There's so many technologies that we're talking about. So I think it's both ways, where employees have to also take advantage of it, but organizations have to do a lot more. I don't know how much we're doing that, because I feel most organizations are still reeling with the fact in terms of absorbing the emerging technologies themselves.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And you rightly pointed out that I think cost of talent. Like if we just talk about numbers and why what you said makes a lot more sense. That cost of hiring a new talent and then onboarding them and then getting them up to speed, both in terms of capital and time, is always so much more than if people who are already in the org can just learn the new thing. But I think yes, because this is a new phenomena in India, as you mentioned, that this is not something which is very rampant or at high scale yet. I think people are yet to realize it and internalize it. And
Yes.
I am definitely optimistic, because always there are quite a few patterns from the west that do get repeated, probably few years down the line in India as well. So I do believe that this might be something that we might see
Oh,
happening more.
I mean, I think I completely agree to that. I've seen, today we have, for example, in one of our groups, we have a pharmacist who's today a VP of, VP of product and design. So,
Right.
I think it is for us to be open to, giving people those opportunities. I have enough more examples of people who've switched careers from joining post ISB, joining in management, roles, and switching to product.
Right.
So it's about, how much do you want to invest in them if they have the potential, and give them time to go up that learning curve.
Right, right. I have another very interesting example from our Scalar team itself. So our head of people team is a person who started out, of course, has 15, 17 years of experience in as a HR professional, and then he became head of engineering for a small startup as well. He's a self-taught programmer, led a team of 30, 40 engineers, and actually he became a hardcore programmer.
Wow.
And now at Scalar, he's again, playing the role of head of people, but of course, keeps dabbling in tech as well. And I think there's also in knowledge management, there's this concept of T-shaped curve, right? The T-shaped learning graph, where like often people with exposure to diverse fields end up performing so much better than people who have always remained just deep into one field. Of course, both add value, but they sometimes end up creating different kind of value for the organization. Rajshekhar, coming to you, I think would love to hear your thoughts on. I'm sure that Express B has been growing a lot, and as you are growing your team to expand on innovation and tech development. Um, what kind of role do you see that like if you can share how do you see that tech team, or making a very high performance, not just large in numbers but very very big in capability as well? How do you see tech team playing a role in growth of the company, and how do you plan, like, if you can, with our audience, I'm sure, who are all trying to build a very high performance tech team for their organizations, what is the strategy that you are designing, or have worked for you in the past to build a high performance tech team?
Sure, sure. Obviously, as every other company like PhonePe, Zeta, XpressBees is also a very tech-focused company. We don't call ourselves tech first, but we are very tech-focused company because we believe that technology will play a very important role in taking from the current state of the company to the kind of growth that we want to see in the next 3 to 5 years, basically. Actually, a lot of investment has happened in the past, but the we are actually doing orders of magnitude more investment. We have started that actually last year, and we want to do that in the coming years in various technology automation initiatives. Now, coming to the how do we build the technology organization and a high performing technology organization. So the approach that we have taken, personally I have taken along with other technology leaders in the company, is basically derive a technology roadmap from the company's objectives, the growth plans for the next few years. That is one aspect. And secondly, we have built a technology competency framework, very detailed technology competency framework, the entire ladder level framework. What are the expectations at each level? Thirdly, we created the org pyramid that we want to actually have, that will help us achieve the success that we want. Once we know the org pyramid that we are looking for, what is the number of people that at each level we want, we have clarity how we want to approach that hiring. Now, how to building this org pyramid requires hiring senior and seasoned engineers, and also lots of junior engineers, not necessarily seasoned engineers, but junior engineers with lots of potential. So this is where the talent pool question also comes, because now our talent requirements are very high, but the number of people who meet our bar is much less than the demand that we have. In this regard, basically, the approach we have taken is first identify the critical mass of senior and seasoned engineers who can form the nucleus of the technology organization, and then around them build the larger organization of the other junior and high potential engineers, either from the college or from the market, and use these seasoned engineers to mentor them, train them and grow them over a period of time. So even though we need, I don't know, probably 20 SD2s or SD3s, we might not be able to hire so all these experienced engineers from the market, right from the day one. So it's a little bit of a painful journey. We actually hire a bunch of engineers from colleges and a bunch of junior engineers from the market, and we actually take the time to grow them, the junior engineers, into actual SD2s, the senior SDs, and the lead SDs or the principal SDs over a period of time. It will be a long journey of 3 to 5 years. It will be somewhat painful. Some of the engineers whom we train will be poached by other companies. That's okay. But we have to build a learning organization, because we cannot solely depend on hiring seasoned engineers from the market. We have to build an organization with a pipeline where people can come at the bottom of the pyramid and have a process and an opportunity to grow to the top of the pyramid. So given that we have a defined competency framework and a critical mass, the nucleus of the senior engineers, and then some sort of a mentoring program which helps to actually grow them. And finally, one thing I personally believe is to actually throw the junior engineers into really challenging situations. They will actually learn to swim. Finally, you have to throw them into the pool and then let them. We will support them from the background, but we should see how they will actually perform, how many can actually learn to swim, or how many are sinking. We'll see. Actually, the challenging situations will identify the smartness within those engineers, basically. So the combination of mentoring and actually putting them in the challenging situations is the way we are taking to build up our organization. And that we are looking at a 3 to 5 years journey here. It won't happen in a year. It will take a long time to build this entire organization.
Makes sense, Rajshekar. Thank you so much for these great inputs. I'm sure they would be kind of very helpful for anyone who might be planning to be scaling up the tech teams, and of course not just in headcount numbers, but in terms of very high performance as well. Uh, the next question I would probably open up for all the panelists here, which is that throughout your maybe decades of hiring and building high performance tech teams, if you could share some, maybe at one, two, as many there could be, but some of the non-intuitive learnings that you might have had uh, about either sourcing quality tech talent, shortlisting them, or even in the hiring process, which you applied and which led to great outcomes for you. And again, not just in the sense that these people were able to you were able to hire them, but they also ended up because you would have seen them at much longer time window. That not only it created good impact on hiring pipeline, and the people who came through that journey also ended up performing well for the team. Maybe I would let you all jog the memory a little bit, and through decades of experience, if you could share. I'm sure that in all the rich experience there would be some learning, some non-intuitive learnings which might not be so obvious. Would love to hear about that, maybe starting with Manmeet, if you could share any such anecdotes.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot today around a bunch of this stuff is, I mean, I wouldn't call it non-intuitive anymore. It's just a question of whether you're willing to invest the time and effort in doing some of those things. So I think some of the things that have worked for us is, for example, not necessarily, like, we've had some great success both in product as well as engineering roles for folks who've not necessarily come from that background, but have been willing to sort of make those investments, learn themselves, and it has just been that opportunity of saying, could someone give us a chance? Could we sort of try this out and see how it works out? Internally, I think it was a lot easier, because once you're in the company, it's easy for people to say, yeah, I could take a bet on you to run the analytics team. I could take a bet on you to sort of figure out how we really should be doing CRM. Take your help in sort of figuring out how product needs to be done. And I think that has sort of been really successful, because what was earlier being discussed around the T-shaped learning, that sort of comes in very, very useful in a bunch of these functions. Knowing one thing deeply and then sort of being able to implement that knowledge and understanding in another has actually been fairly successful for us. The other thing that we have been very, very invested in is how we think about the PhonePe University, where we are saying across functions, how do you sort of look at careers in engineering? Within engineering, how do we accelerate growth? So some of the stuff around sort of having fairly well-defined engineering journeys, and then hand-holding people through the senior, at the junior level, just doing more scale things, more classrooms, learning sessions, telling people not just about fundamentals around CS, which they probably have learned before and it's easier for them to find, but actually taking through specific examples of how we've been able to scale, how our systems are designed, what have been some of those nuances that have enabled us to continue to sort of work with these tetrabytes of data that we work with today. So it has been that process of saying, here, take this learning and then translate that into whichever way this works best for you. And in terms of accelerating growth, us being able to give people bigger, more complex challenges to solve for, and then that translating into them also sort of understanding the need to give back. Because if you're seeing an ecosystem around you where everybody is invested in your growth, you have a mentor who's sort of spending so much of their time with you, you also sort of see that responsibility of doing it to the next set of folks that you are kind of closely working with. So, I mean, not necessarily non-intuitive, but definitely a fair level of effort and work and structured planning that has gotten us there. And I think that's sort of the way I would think about the successes that we've had in this particular space.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for that, Manmeet. Passing the baton to Margaret, if you could share some of your learnings regarding which worked really great for you when hiring and building talent.
So, two parts, right? One is, what do you do with the existing talent? What do you do with incoming talent? Um, with the talent that we already have, what is very important, and I think Rajshekar touched upon it, is that it is very important to have that foresight, right? That what is your landscape for the next couple of years, right? What is it that we are going to pivot towards? If I have to give a very like, practical example, in the last 2 to 3 years, we took a big leap in terms of, probably in technical terms, I think Rajashekar and you will understand, but we moved from EC2 deployment to multi-tenant or multi-cloud deployment in AWS. Now, with the scale that we were, talking about, it meant that it would put us years ahead in terms of what organizations are planning. And when you think of something like that, you cannot then look at how will you bring about that change in isolation. So what this required is getting the leadership to decide that, for to bring this change, what is the kind of talent, critical talent, that we will have to have in place, right? And that's where you make that decision between hire versus upskilling. And then when you look at upskilling, it it was a series of initiatives that needed to be done. So right from the leadership, that is the co-founder and the CTO himself, where he conducted series of sessions along with leadership that themselves, let's be practical, most of the technologies that we are talking about has been in the system only for about 3 to 5 years. Some of the emerging technologies that we're talking about. So it's not that you're going to get anybody with years and years of experience and SME domain expertise. So it required leaders themselves understanding first principles and fundamentals themselves, right? And then trying to understand what is that curriculum we need to put together, right? Where is it that leadership internally itself can drive that change? Where we need to bring first principles strong or fundamentals, some experts in the industry who are strong in those, at least in the fundamentals of certain applications, and get them on board. We did a lot of you know fireside chats. We did, it was a curated learning to get that. And I'm giving you a practical example instead of just broad basing it. But it it was a journey which included deep learning sessions. Before deep learning sessions, enough of pre-reads, assignments to test your uptake in that knowledge. It involved getting SMEs, and most important, which is going to be the way forward, is community learning, right? You will have to invest in peer-to-peer learning, community learning, because today how people perceive upskilling, reskilling, learning is very different from what we have perceived in the past. Today, they want to learn from experiences. They want leaders to share with them, you know, tips, tricks, hacks. How did they solve it? Real life problem statements. They want, like quick videos where referenceable community, databases where they can quickly retrieve it. That is taking shape as upskilling learning today, right? So you're actually moving from probably academy based or specific learning journeys to actual real on the job learning. So this is where the emphasis that you need to put on your existing talent, right? And what is very important is creating that nucleus and then understanding the peripheral around it. When you come to hiring, this is going to be a challenge with almost every organization. And what has worked for us is that the talent is very scarce, like Manmeet said, right? There's only that much talent that has been exposed to that kind of technology. What do you do about it? Then you have to have a kind of a strategy in place where, one, you will invest in raw talent, and then you will get them in and get them exposed to that learning environment and let them upskill. Then you get lateral talent, not necessarily on the same domain. Get them from different industries, but where they have tested success and depth of mastery of their existing practice, right? So what we are actually getting to, and I think we spend the last couple of years making a very tight competency framework, a tech competency framework. But that relevancy now, where earlier it will hold true for 3 years, 2 years, is now shortening to 18 months and 12 months also. So while the pillar of craft is going to be very important, the other pillars which are very, very important according to me is, what do you look for in every person in your current talent and exist in your talent that you're bringing in, you're going to look for learnability, you're going to look for adaptability, you're going to look for people who are self-directed and self-motivated to upskill. So, and applying application of knowledge. So you're going to look for these qualities because you're going to have technology rollover. What is going to be important is the people have to survive. So we've tried with raw talent, getting interns from campuses. We've tried scaler as well. We've got talent from varied industries, and that's working for us. In fact, I'll just close with this, that a lot of us put emphasis, and I'm making a statement here, but we put a lot of emphasis on getting from the premier colleges, regional colleges. But if you actually crowdsource through the right mechanism, whether through Hack for Earth or through various other ICPC or other channels, you can really get emerging talent from even not known colleges. It's about
Right.
just finding them and investing in them, as long as they have the right attitude and traits. So that's working for us.
Right. No, that's I think a great insight, Margaret. And as I think Manmeet also was mentioning in the beginning, that tech is a very different domain altogether. The reason being that the skills and the evaluation criteria are so objective that it can easily become a level playing field. It doesn't matter, where you come from, which college you might have been to, which degree you might have been to. Probably, it's very like, I wouldn't call it easy, but it is at least possible to objectively evaluate someone. And hence, I think while in other domains and in the past we had to rely on external signaling, the likes of college, or past company, or probably which degree, etc. But in tech, probably that might not be as relevant anymore. Of course, there might be a higher density when you shortlist, by higher density of probability of finding talent, but it doesn't mean that doesn't exist anywhere.
I would
Rachel,
like to register actually partial disagreement with this thought about the objective ability to objectively assess technology talent.
right.
So I'll bring my tech perspective here. Basically, one is, yes, we can actually evaluate objectively the core technical skills. Okay, can you code or not? Do you know data structures or not? Yeah, we can actually. But there is a third level where, can you solve problems or not? Do you have a structured approach to solve problems or not? This is
Right.
not actually easy to evaluate.
Right.
It requires so the thing is, if a person is not able to solve a problem, is it because he actually has a fundamental weakness in terms of capability, or is he just not able to do this problem alone? I mean, my worry all the day, whenever I'm interviewing a candidate, is by focusing on a specific problem, am I missing out on a potentially good talent? So I always, because my worry is not only when I am interviewing, my worry is when my hiring managers are interviewing. I regularly interact with them, and they make sure that it's very easy to hire really great talent. It's very easy to reject not so great talent. But it's the people who are in the middle now, who actually might be having high potential. How do we not miss them? How do we ensure that our interviewing process will not miss out on them? So don't be too objective. You have to be objective, but at a certain level you have to apply certain intuition, and then see, you have to dig deeper into the candidate's psyche and understand, does he or she have higher potential than what is visible. That is very critical, because after all, interviewing is a very stressful for everybody. And
Absolutely.
a lot of good people, high potential people, might be stressed out and might not do well in the interview or in the test or whatever the situation.
That's
I ask the hiring managers, and I try to do myself, to ensure that we do the extra, put the extra effort to figure that out. So yeah, that's one comment I wanted to
exactly.
make. This is
Yes,
very
yes,
critical. Otherwise, the thing is, as it is, our pool is small, and if we are too rule oriented and objective, we might miss out on some of the really talented people.
right.
And we
No,
should be
that's
able to
absolutely
take the bets. We have to be able to place bets on some individuals,
right.
and you will build that intuitive capability to place bets over years. As you repeatedly interview people, as you repeatedly interact with people, you start
Right.
forming that model. Oh, when people behave this way, probably there is some high potential. We have
Right.
to learn that.
Right. No, absolutely, Rajshekhar. And as you mentioned, that interview, as it's pretty obvious to people that interview might be high stress for a candidate, but interestingly, it's high stress for the hiring manager and the interviewer as well,
Oh, of course,
because
yeah.
right, and the reason being that it's such a high stake window where you cannot afford to have a false positive, because the cost of having a wrong person in the team is very high. At the
Yes.
same time, the cost of having a false negative is very high, because you might be losing out in such a kind of starved pool. If you're losing out on someone who could be good, that cost is also very high, hence very high stress for both the sides. And double clicking on that, as you rightly pointed out, that particularly when we talk about high impact startups, like like everyone in this panel, uh, we are not trying to hire just code monkeys, right? Like
Yes.
someone who might just know code but doesn't understand, is not able to map it with real impact business, what business is doing, how it might make things better for the user. So evaluating for all of those also become important, that do they really have the product thinking, unlike, let's say, outsourcing world, where someone is just going to ask you to write some
Exactly.
code. That is not all. And would love to maybe hear your thoughts on that. One part is just evaluating for very hard skills, whether this person can solve a particular problem, whether this person can write code in a certain with a certain quality or not. That's relatively easy, I would still say.
Yes.
But the other part, whether this person can collaborate really well with the product team, can come up with ideas and suggestions which could really create impact. And I'm sure that like all the companies in this group, we very heavily emphasize on that engineers have to also, they are not just service providers, they are not just going
Yes.
to crunch code what they are asked to, but they are going to add value, right? How do you evaluate for this capability, that this person might be a great programmer,
Hmm.
but would this person be focused on impact? Would this person be able to understand product user needs, and really cater to those, uh, like objective alignment with the companies? Because I have seen, sometimes, of course it's not often, fortunately, for in my experience, but sometimes there might be someone with great depth into what they do, like their core capabilities, but still not being able to become a value adding, like high value adding member of the overall team, because they do not connect to the product, right? So how do you evaluate for that, Rajshekhar? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
As a hiring manager, at every level, even for a fresh graduate from a college or a person with say 3 year, 5 year, or 10 year experience, I always try to look for examples in their even for a fresh graduate. So how he approached his college project, internship, even the courses he has studied, how he interacts with his friends or the teachers. I actually look for specific examples. For experienced individuals, obviously, I ask for examples of problem solving, creativity, collaboration, how they actually showed accountability, ownership, how they have actually shown independent thinking. I actually look for specific, explicit examples. For that matter, uh, uh, if, have they faced any challenging situation and even failed? It's okay if they fail. If they fail, and what is the learning they have taken from that? Are they able to articulate it? Do they demonstrate the self-awareness for the fact that, yeah, I went through a challenging situation, I failed, and I actually learned from that situation, and this is the learning I have. Are they able to articulate that? I look for these examples, these demonstrations from their past, right from the college fresher to a person with any amount of experience with skill at every level. I look for those examples, and I have found that this helps to kind of identify how well they can actually gel with the team, gel with the organization, interact with the rest of the team members. I have found it reasonably work well for me. I actually train my hiring managers in these aspects. I specifically tell them these are the kinds of questions I look for, and you should be asking the candidates when you are being a hiring manager, to ensure that we are not only looking for the hard skills but also the soft skills, which are very very critical for us. Especially for us, the most core soft skill is the ownership slash accountability and learnability, willingness to learning from the surroundings, learning from the others, learning from failures. So
Right.
yeah, we ask those questions, and that kind of helped me.
No, that's great. There are few very interesting questions from the audience as well. That let's take them. The first one probably Manmeet and Margaret might have inputs on, because you both talked quite a bit about internal upskilling and tech training programs. So the question is, which definitely is very important, that how do you measure the impact of your tech skilling initiatives? Because in L&D, one pitfall that even I have often absorbed is that we can start a lot of initiatives, but how do you make sure that they actually led to meaningful impact? And for that, defining a metric, measuring that at a certain interval becomes so important, and which is not easy as well, right? So thoughts on that, how do you measure the impact of learning outcome? What kind of metrics do you design and track? Yeah.
That's a that is a great question. In fact, this is a constant debate that we have within the team, that every time we take up a learning, or if we how do we define our learning output. We clearly want to move away from standard metrics. We need to understand what is the problem we're trying to solve, right? For a, like, again, live example, for a organization like ours, incident management is key, right? So if at all we want to have a certain bar or a certain ritual or a certain way in which we operate and we respond to incident management, if that comes as a requirement for us to ensure that, hey, we need to build enough of curriculum and expose people to why is incident management so important, it does not become learning's problem alone. Of course, you need to work with a whole wide set of stakeholders, because there is one, exposure to that learning and awareness, but also then a lot of other checks and balances that make people become accountable for it. So it's, I would say it's a joint effort rather than looking at learning in isolation. Today, what happens is we look at learning outcomes in isolation of the other, other initiatives that need to happen. So anything today that we pick, we've moved from learning in isolation, taking the problem statement and trying to solve it, rather being part of those debates that this is our problem statement. What does leadership need to do? What does our policy and protocols need to do? What will learning do? How will we make the learner accountable? All of this becomes a full circle. So whether it is incident management now, probably even one of the important mandates that we've picked up today, and I'm probably tying this also to your previous point that we were discussing, that if today the person who is building a technology, building on, a product and offering that we are saying is going to be disruptive in nature, it is, you don't you we are making that person accountable by saying that, hey, you need to know who is the end user, which is the, what how does this put value to that individual from a business offering. Where is it that we've kind of carved that gap, saying that nobody has seen that gap, we're trying to fill that gap. We might be one of the pioneers in this area. That appreciation is also very important, and that's where you, from a learning standpoint, again need to understand what should be the uptake in that learning for their individual in terms of understanding the business, right? So we've started with assessments, we started with a lot of other interventions that helps us understand, does a person know, if we are a banking tech organization, what are the nuances of a banking environment, right? How are we governed? What are the regulations? Why do we build what we are building? Why is it that outage time is very, very critical for us? So it's tying it to the right end metrics, which is very important.
Makes sense. Manmeet, would love to hear your thoughts on metric definition for the learning data as well.
Sure. So for us, I mean, for us, it's much narrow maybe than what Margaret was talking about. So very specifically saying, I'm talking about upskilling. If I'm talking about upskilling, that needs to translate into two things. One, the kind of complexity and business complex problems that the person is able to solve for. So if normally I would wait 3 years, 4 years for somebody to solve a particular level of complexity, has this entire initiative ensured that they're able to solve for those faster. So that's of course longer term, but that's the primary thing that we are looking for. Uh, Velocity of growth in the organization, complexity of problems that people are getting to solve fairly tight metrics that are actually easy to evaluate. The other thing on an ongoing basis that we also look at is that as people are going through these initiatives, whether it is from the specific learning about how we do things to the mentor-led project work that folks are doing, what is it, how is it translating into superior output in the day-to-day work as per their managers? So as part of the regular review process, how do we look at, as per manager, has this person demonstrated an increased understanding of this particular area? Have they demonstrated an increased ability to leverage what they've learned at work? So that gives us a because we're talking about upskilling, and I'm saying that you have learned to grow faster, is that actually translating in this, which, as Margaret was saying, is what counts, right? What is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then what is therefore the right metric to sort of evaluate whether it's happening or not.
Makes sense. There's another follow-on question which I find very interesting as well, which is also related to upskilling and the training programs. The biggest problem, of course, the learning delta and the impact can only be created through high adherence to the program, no matter how good the program is. But if people don't adhere to it or put kind of hours, a certain number of hours, and close follow-up, and of course, like as all of us would have seen, then that is the hardest part, right? So the question posted by the audience is, how do we ensure learner engagement when it comes to like fundamentally learning tech skilling initiatives, and what are some of the techniques that you might have used to get more people to actively participate and follow on throughout the entire program? Another common pattern is that on day one of the training program there will be everyone getting engaged with it, but as weeks and months pass by, then we see massive dips into that. Would love to hear thoughts here as well. I think it's a very important problem that almost everyone faces.
So my
So maybe I'll take
2 seconds.
this question. So I'll just I'll probably respond to this question. So at ExpressBees, at least myself and my fellow leaders, we are actually thinking of we are putting the onus for this on the actual engineering managers, because they are the ones who actually directly interact with the individual engineers, and they are the ones who set the learning programs for those engineers. They are the ones who actually know how the time of a given engineer is actually spent on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, how much time they are actually spending their time on day-to-day coding, or attending meetings, and then how much time he can actually allocate to the learning programs. The engineering manager usually knows everything. They know exactly how to allocate the time, and they know the issues that a particular person is facing, and then they can make those decisions. And we put the onus on the engineering managers to actually ensure that adherence also by giving the right feedback to the engineer over a period of time appropriately. Now, by itself, adherence doesn't solve the problem. Obviously, we have to tie the outcome, as in the outcome is whether the person is able to perform better after 3 months or 6 months and handle something independently or not, and then tie it to that adherence rather than just pushing for adherence. Showcase the actual outcome, whether it is good or bad, and then tie it to the adherence, and then hopefully if somebody is not really adhering well, that feedback will actually push them to do better in the next cycle, or as next 6 month cycle, something like that. So yeah, that is the high level approach we have taken. Basically, engineering managers take more responsibility in this regard, because they are the ones who know. For example, there are times when probably they may have to take a decision to actually probably put a pause on the training programs because they have to focus on some high priority project. Because that decisions have to be taken at that level.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rajashekhar. Manmeet, if you had some pointers around
Sure.
on
Thanks.
increasing adherence.
Yeah, no, I actually was going to say that my opinion on this is maybe somewhat controversial. I think that you can't really force anybody to learn. So, therefore, requiring adherence that is more procedural maybe is not in the best interest of me as a company, also, because then I've got somebody who could be doing coding at this particular point in time, sitting in a classroom, listening to something that they're anyway not interested in. So, we have found that sort of allowing people, letting it more of a pull thing, where one, of course, factor is the quality of the learning session itself, but the bigger thing of what is in it for me.
Yeah.
So if you see that it is translating into you learning things that makes your ability to contribute to work directly much higher, and then that translates into your growth into the organization, your ability to solve more complex problems much faster, then that in turn comes out as a better mechanism. If I'm able to get 30 people to pay attention and do a good job and do it with the right level of motivation and ownership, I am better off than trying to maybe get 100 people to sit through a much more enforced sort of a system. So that's the approach we've taken, that you don't worry too much about the adherence, you focus on your inputs, and what output you get in this particular process is the right output, is kind of the
Yeah.
way we look at it.
Margaret, over to you for thoughts on increasing adherence.
Um, so I think when we talk about learning, I think all of us agree that it's a 70-30 ratio, right? Today, 70% is what take it. I mean, we have to accept it that it is where the learner will want to decide what they want to learn, right? We can only control that 20 to 30%, right? Now, in this entire spectrum of 100%, also, all yes, I completely agree, you cannot mandate learning on people today, right? You're dealing with modern workers that they need to believe in the fact that they need to take it. And I think especially in the industry that we are right now in a hyper growth phase, you already dealing with individuals that have to carve out time for learning. And and then you have to also bring in interventions like how do you allow people to make time for learning. So, what is very important, and I'm going to use it as an extension to what Manmeet said, and we have also tried a host of different interventions. What are some of the clear wins? Probably how HR teams can look at it is, one is it needs that leadership sponsorship, very very critical. That why is it important? It needs that that discussion, hard talk with the manager and the individual to say, we need to do X to take you here. So they need to see that line of sight is why is it important for them, right? And third, and it's just been 2 days that I had another discussion with CHRs where learning challenges is very real, but one of the areas that we are also dabbling with is, you need to create that scarcity. You need to say that if you're investing in an industry expert, if you're investing in a very deep learning program, how you select that cohort, how people you bring in that pull strategy rather than the push strategy, saying that, hey, we've curated this with a specific cohort. And when people see the value of that cohort one, then you aspire to be part of that cohort two, because it's an earned part of being part of that cohort, and not that, hey, you've been picked up so you have to be part of it. So it is about how you make sure that with the today, I think all of us are offering an LMS, learning MOOCs, so many interventions where a person needs to decide from all of the and plus added to that what they are being exposed to in their peer network, in online. They need to decide, okay, from all of these opportunities, what is important for me. So I think it's also a challenge for the learner, that where do I spend my time, what do I want to do if I want to learn. So it's both perspectives, which is very important.
Absolutely. I have my 2 cents to share here as well, because at Scalar we do see learners coming in to upskill themselves at a fairly large scale, and some very fundamental human I think psychology and biases that play very interesting role at high adherence, because in Scalar programs, on the contrary, we saw very high adherence. It's a 9 month long program with where people have to spend almost 3 hours every day. So it's a lot of time commitment, right? Despite that, what we see is that more than 94% of the people follow through the entire program, right? And if I ask that what causes that, of course it could never be just one thing. There are multiple motivating factors, but fundamentally, I think the two key points that Manmeet, Margaret, Rashikar, I think all of you talked about is, one is that the person himself or herself internalizing that I need this and doing this would help me do better, in whatever ways. It could be career, it could be better earning, but fundamentally it has to be the buy-in from the person. Because at Scalar we are like, the person is enrolling himself or herself. Rajshekar, when we met last, I think you were emphasizing on that fact that someone who joined Scalar Psychologically, they have proven a fact that they internalize that I need to learn more, and they want to learn more. And
Exactly.
that, I
That's the
think, is
signal that they are motivated and passionate about learning and growth.
correct. So I think at the very first place, that existing and having show, having proved that in action is most critical part. If the person himself or herself is not intent about doing a certain kind of upskilling program, there is, like as Manmeet you were saying, you cannot force it on someone, right? The other part is, which I believe is skin in the game, and I also have some data to back that up. In the past, for example, some of the employers came to us that we would want to maybe enroll 10, 20, 40 of our engineers into your program, and we will sponsor their entire fee, right? Interestingly, the people for who the entire fee was sponsored had substantially almost 70% less adherence than people who took it themselves, who paid out of their own pocket, right? So skin in the game is also super important. And then going forward now, if even if an employer comes to us and say that we will sponsor it, we have to tell them, don't do that. Either only subsidize it, let there be some skin in the game, let them prove it that I want to do it by actually paying money for it, or instead of subsidizing as well, reimburse it, let them take the course, tell them that once you complete it fully, then reimburse the fee, instead of just saying that we have bought it for you and you just do it. Because without conviction that I need it and skin in the game, I think these two levers itself create a massive delta. And going further than that, I think then there are some other things as well. As Margaret, I think you touched upon that learning is very heavily a community activity. So when people are able to have clear visibility into what people around me are doing, one very basic human emotion that drives most of the people is FOMO, fear of missing out, right? And if it is visible to me, one of the reasons why, like, while universities, colleges might have many flaws, but there are some very good things that exist with them as well. One part is that social learning experience. People learn probably less in just a classroom, but more in the discussions that might follow after that classroom, or more when they are building things together, right? Again, one example that I often take, that if I talk about, let's say, MIT or Stanford or IITs, what is different about these better performing colleges is not that they have access to better books. It's not that they, like, their professors might be better, but even they are not 10x or 100 times better than the professors at other colleges. The difference is the community learning experience, or the kind of learning groups that get created at these institutes, right? So I think creating some social learning experiences, the community learning experiences in any cohort which is learning things together, also creates a fairly big delta in the adherence. And if there is high adherence, if the content is good and adherence is good, then learning delta will automatically get created. So some of the learnings that we had from our running scalar program for many years.
Perfect. It just validates what we said. Your A&B
Absolutely.
testing of people who sign up
Yeah.
versus being signed up for.
Right. Great. I think we are a little outside of the time. Thank you so much for a great conversations. Very privileged to be hosting such an esteemed panel today. I hope all our audience were able to take some input which might be helpful to improve both talent acquisition and talent improvement and grooming plans for their companies. We do conduct, we keep inviting people from the industry who have led fairly big initiatives, have been part of high impact organizations. So please follow Scalers channel, People Matters channels, and we'll keep you posted on the upcoming sessions as well. Thank you so much, Manmeet, Margaret, and Rajshekhar, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge and learnings from your journey.
Thank you.
Pleasure is ours. I think it was
Thank you.
really
Thanks a lot.
interesting
Thank
debate.
you.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Asmani, over to you for a closing note.
It's okay. Thank you again for joining us today.